Member from Oshawa.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it is always my distinct privilege to stand in this legislature and bring the voices of Oshawa with me. But on this occasion, it is my privilege and my responsibility to speak as the NDP critic for pensions on behalf of two-thirds of Ontarians who do not have a workplace pension, and to speak for those who deserve to feel secure in their retirement. Pensions have always been a vital piece of our economic stability and the cornerstone of financial security in retirement. Today, I will be speaking on Bill 56, an act to require the establishment of the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. Ontarians deserve the right to retire with dignity, and the next generation is not going to be taken care of. Two-thirds of Ontarians do not currently have a workplace pension. Some Ontarians with insufficient workplace pensions still will struggle into retirement. It is difficult to imagine that the majority of our aging population will not have the resources to pay their own way, to afford housing, to buy necessities, to contribute to the economy, or to live with dignity. It is a pretty grim reality that we are facing collectively. We have a retirement savings crisis in Ontario. Whether we are talking about retiring seniors, those in the prime of their working lives, or the next crop of workers to come, we need to be doing more. In 2012, the median income for Ontarians over the age of 65 was $26,720, or $2,227 per month. To put that in perspective, the average monthly cost for seniors housing in Ontario last year was over $2,750. That's more than $500 short every month, only taking housing into account. We cannot allow this to be the future for our seniors. And what about our youth? The government simply isn't doing enough to address youth unemployment in this province, and it is worrying. Talk is cheap. Not only do we need to take action now, but we need to start planning for the future. How on earth can our youth without employment start to save for retirement when they can't even pay their tuition bills today? Debt continues to balloon, jobs don't just appear, and future stability is not on the horizon. If their own government doesn't have a strong plan for the future, how can the youth of today be expected to plan for themselves? I am pleased to serve Ontario as the NDP pension critic. I look forward to working to hold this Liberal government to account when it comes to the future financial stability of workers, whether they are General Motors pensioners in my riding of Oshawa,
Member from Eglinton Lawrence is a little loud,
or Ontarians across all of our constituencies. I hope we will see this government reevaluate and reprioritize its retirement savings initiatives and prioritize Ontarians over financial institutions. I honestly hope we will actually see this Ontario Retirement Pension Plan and not just hear about it. We implore this government to design and implement a progressive public pension plan for hardworking people across Ontario who deserve one, and stop focusing on exceptions and exemptions and start focusing on helping more Ontarians. All Ontarians deserve the right to retire with dignity, and I'm here today to remind the government to keep this principle at the forefront as we continue to debate the details of the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. As I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, I am truly humbled by the opportunity to stand in this chamber and speak at length about an issue that is so significant to all Ontarians and to our province as a whole. And I am honoured to speak on behalf of the NDP and the rich history of support our party has shown to the pension movement in Ontario and across Canada. In 2009, New Democrats reached out to constituents all over the province to learn directly from Ontarians about what changes were needed in Ontario's retirement system. And while those consultations were more than just window dressing, unlike arguably the government's recent round of consultations, we ultimately came to the same conclusion. Despite the fact that the government opted not to support the Ontario Retirement Plan as proposed by the NDP in early 2010, we are pleased to see that they've come around and found the value in this concept and the need for proactive action. Our work on fairness, issues such as retirement security, is what first attracted me to this party, and it's because of the core principles of collective good that I am standing here as a New Democrat. As a teacher, I was fortunate enough to find myself in an occupation that provided a good and reliable pension. And as a New Democrat, I believe that opportunity should be extended to all people. As New Democrats, we have always and will always believe that all Ontarians should have access to a strong, defined benefit pension plan. And for those that don't have one, it is our duty as representatives of this province to provide it. It's important to note that the ORPP will not solve all of the problems that ail the pension system in Ontario. As we work to address the retirement security crisis in this province and acknowledge the need for proactive solutions, we must also address the existing gaps in our system if we want to make the most significant possible change. It's important to add new tools for delivering security in retirement, but that doesn't mean that we can ignore the problems that are right in front of us today. We need to work within the existing system as well to ensure that it is operating effectively and reliably. The Canadian pension system is based on 3 pillars that are intended to provide reliable retirement security across the country. Pillar 1, universal government benefits for seniors, also known as Old Age Security or OAS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement or GIS, and the Ontario Guaranteed Annual Income System or GAINS. Together, these 3 programs provide guaranteed income to all seniors to ensure at least a minimum standard of living. Pillar 2 is the Canada Pension Plan, or CPP, which provides a reliable benefit to all Canadian workers. And Pillar 3, employment pension plans and individual retirement savings. Together, these 3 pillars comprise the backbone of a strong retirement income system in Canada. But the 3rd pillar is failing us. Today, 2/3 of workers in Ontario do not have a workplace pension plan, and those that do cannot always rely that their pension will be there when they retire. This government has also spoken at length about its enthusiasm for voluntary savings options, such as PRPPs. But Ontarians are leaving millions of dollars of RRSP room on the table every year. In 2012, in my riding of Oshawa, 95% of those aged 65 or older received income from CPP, but only 9.4% received income from an RRSP. In terms of workplace plans and in terms of personal savings, the 3rd pillar is failing. According to December's Auditor General's report, 92% of all defined benefit pension plans in Ontario were underfunded at the start of this year. And over the past 8 years, the total amount of underfunding of these plans has grown from $22 billion to $75 billion. This is not an insignificant problem. The fact is, we have a retirement security crisis in Ontario, and part of the reason for that crisis is that Ontarians don't feel secure that their pension will be there when they retire. Every day, my office hears from constituents that are concerned about the security of their pensions. Their retirement plan is based on the belief that their pension, something they've contributed to their entire working lives, will be there when they retire. But as that date approaches, that assumption appears less and less certain. This is a sentiment I am sure that all of us have heard in our constituencies across the province. Stories from the not-too-distant past, such as Nortel or Algoma Steel, and stories that are still playing out in front of us, such as U.S. Steel in Hamilton. They continue to remind us of the need for reform. I would like to read part of an email I received from 2 former U.S. Steel employees and how the instability of their pension has affected their ability to plan for retirement. My wife and I both retired from U.S. Steel, but formerly Stelco employees. Conditions of our employment included a defined pension plan with benefits. I fully realize that things can change and steps may have to be taken to reduce financial losses by a company, but to do that on the backs of employees who have already given the better portion of their lives to help achieve the company's goals is not only unfair, but a broken promise of what was expected in retirement. Some retired earlier based on circumstances and calculations made by then Stelco. My wife was one of those. Now, a shift in time later, we are faced with the dilemma of a possible reduction in pension and benefits for both of us. If this happens, we will undoubtedly be in a dire situation, faced with having to make many changes to get by. It definitely won't be the same lifestyle we planned on based on our pensions and benefits to date. This at a time in our lives when we shouldn't have to worry about whether we may have to go back to work at 65 or, in my case, 70 years old. And that's only if we can find work. This letter to you is intended to express our concerns about our future and what is being done by government officials to stop this injustice by U.S. Steel. It seems U.S. Steel has broken a few promises they made to the employees and the province when taking over Stelco. Let them find other ways to achieve their goals without putting their burden on the backs of pensioners. By the way, it isn't the pensioners' fault the pension plan is underfunded. And I would also like to read a local comment that was sent to me through my website from a Sears retiree. I cannot understand why a government that is trying to create a pension plan for seniors in low-income situations cannot see the damage and future costs to its own budget related to even one large defined pension plan failure. The Sears situation is one example where I myself, a 38-year retired employee, will be affected because of the lack of concern and action of the government. The government continues to allow large companies to defer the payments, top-ups into pension plans, while all along allowing massive dividends to shareholders and fund managers. The third pillar is only as strong as the regulations that support it, and on that front, this government is failing. Retirement security isn't just about promising a benefit, it is also about ensuring that benefit is delivered. And though the ORPP will provide a necessary supplement to the existing pension system, that does not excuse the government from its obligations to effectively regulate workplace pensions. The Auditor General made 5 recommendations for improving the state of Ontario pension plans during her December report, and we are still waiting to see the government act on any of them. In fact, I wrote a letter to the Minister of Finance on December 17th, which I have here, calling on the government to adopt the AG's recommendation. Here's a piece from that letter. In her report, the Auditor General made 5 recommendations for improving the state of defined benefit pension plans in Ontario, such as providing the Superintendent of Fiscal the same powers as his federal counterpart. This is a matter of grave concern across the province, and specifically for General Motors employees of my riding of Oshawa. I ask that you take the necessary steps to protect pensioners across the province and adopt the Auditor General's recommendations. Though it's not the feel-good, headline-grabbing story that the government is looking for on the pension file, it's an important part of the puzzle for strengthening our retirement system. But no plan is foolproof, and there are always unforeseen bumps in the road. There need to be fail-safes built into the system to ensure that if the parachute doesn't open, that there's still something in place to cushion the fall. In the Ontario pension system, this comes in the form of the Pension Benefit Guarantee Fund, or PBGF. The PBGF was established in 1980 to ensure that when a company goes under and a pension plan is wound up, pensioners are not left bearing the full brunt of the impact. Under the current system, the PBGF will cover up to $1,000 per month in lost benefits for a worker. Unfortunately, as we've seen in the Nortel and Algoma Steel examples, sometimes $1,000 per month is not a sufficient safety net. For workers, this means instability, it means insecurity, and it just doesn't cut it. Often the $1,000 benefit guarantee is enough, but for a worker whose monthly benefit has been reduced by, for example, $2,000, the inadequacy of the guarantee can mean the difference between security and having to choose between paying their mortgage or their child's tuition. Twice, my colleague from Hamilton East Stony Creek has put forward a private member's bill calling on the government to increase the benefit under the PBGF to $2,500 per month. And twice, Mr. Speaker, his bill has stalled. For a government that is trying to show support for retirement security, this seems like a pretty simple way to show it. As I stated earlier, retirement security isn't just about promising a benefit. It is also about ensuring that that benefit is delivered. I should note that my colleague from Hamilton East Stony Creek and I aren't the only ones calling for this change. Harry Arthurs, the expert that your government enlisted to review the state of the pension system in Ontario, first called for an enhancement of the Pension Benefit Guarantee Fund in his 2008 report. As Mr. Arthurs noted in 2008, increasing the protected benefit to $2,500 per month would simply reflect the effect of inflation on the original $1,000 benefit. 7 years later, and that number needs to be reviewed again. So, while the government continues to develop the new Ontario Retirement Pension Plan, I ask that it also review the recommendations made by the Auditor General in her December report and the recommendations made by Harry Arthurs in his report in 2008. It might not be the exciting story that you're looking for, but it's an important part of the bigger picture that you can't continue to ignore. The members on the government side of this room sometimes groan and heckle when we talk about broken Liberal promises. But the question must be asked for the sake of two-thirds of Ontarians without a workplace pension, and for people living in a never-ending cycle of financial struggle, and for people who deserve and want stability in their retirement. It must be asked for people who want to one day be able to retire. And the question is this: assuming we see this pension plan take shape and come to life, will it be the most progressive plan for the most people possible? Interestingly, we don't yet know. This bill, Bill 56, appears to be a token bill that establishes a rudimentary framework and little else. Anything we think we know about this pension plan, we have read in the budget or the Liberal discussion paper. Bill 56 provides the following priorities. The Government of Ontario shall, no later than January 1st, 2017, and in accordance with the parameters set out in the Act, establish the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. It also lays out that at a later date, that the Minister of Finance or another member of the Executive Council shall introduce legislation that will provide for the administration and investment management of the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan through the administrative entity described in Section 2, and that provides for the requirements of the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan, including the basic requirements. So essentially, this bill says that another bill is coming that will outline who will administer and manage the plan. We have been reassured by the government that it will be an arm's-length entity. So let's make sure that it is. Also in this bill is a schedule of basic requirements of the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. Here is what we know. Eligible employers and eligible employees shall contribute to the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. We also find out a bit more about the obligation of eligible employers to deduct contributions. We find out about remittance to a yet-to-be-established administrative entity. We find out that the maximum threshold for 2017 will be $90,000 and that the combined employer-employee contribution rate shall not exceed 3.8%. And we find out that some employees will be eligible and others will be exempt. Those with a comparable plan will be exempt. Retirement benefits shall be paid for the life of the plan member beginning at 65. And there are a few more details, but certainly we are left with more questions, far more questions, than we have answers for. So let's start with this question. Why the rush to table this flimsy token piece of legislation when it accomplishes almost nothing concrete? Was it because it was tabled the same day as the insurance company and bank appeasing PRPP legislation? Was it so that the government could appear to be offering a progressive option alongside a private financial product? Regardless of the reason for the rush, here we are. We know that to develop the strongest and most comprehensive, progressive, inclusive pension plan for the most working Ontarians, there needs to be time and attention paid to working out the details, both broad and specific, which brings me to the government's publicized priority of public engagement. The government spent time recently conducting roundtable public consultations around the province. I had hoped to have one in the Durham and Oshawa area, but alas, there were only about a dozen consultations and we were not lucky enough to host one. However, it was my distinct pleasure to invite myself to the kickoff consultation in Kingston, Ontario. Mr. Speaker, I hope that you will allow me a little walk down memory lane, if I may. I love Kingston. Kingston is one of my favorite communities. It was a dynamic city that I learned inside and out as a student living and studying there. I did my undergraduate degree there, and I have nothing but fond memories of the city and the beautiful landscape and the vibrant downtown. It's hard to believe that I graduated 15 years ago. I was a member of the graduating class of 2000. Fortunately, I was able to graduate with minimal and not insurmountable student debt. Tuition and living expenses were so much more affordable, and my parents were in a position to lessen my personal burden. I was very fortunate. I cannot imagine the reality of students who are graduating now with a debt burden likely equal to the first mortgages of some of the MPPs in this legislature. I can't imagine graduating with that debt burden into a climate of staggering youth unemployment and underemployment. I can't imagine graduating with that debt burden and facing debt repayments, housing costs, transit costs, possibly dental costs, possibly childcare costs, and even consider saving for a wedding or a trip or for an eventual down payment to start building home equity, as we heard yesterday from a Conservative member was the solution, or to consider saving for retirement. How is someone facing that economic reality able to save for the future when the present is robbing them of a secure future? But, Mr. Speaker, I digress. So, back to the government consultation in Kingston. I think, to be fair, the government clearly outlined in their discussion paper what it was they were wanting to hear from Ontarians. The problem was Ontarians wanted to share more than was invited. I'd like to read an email I received from a constituent on this very topic. Being 30, retirement seems like something very far away from myself and my soon-to-be wife. In fact, our retirement fund keeps getting dipped into with unexpected costs like fixing my car or putting down a dear pet. I heard of the difficulty people are having in trying to track down these public consultations about the Ontario pension plan the government looks to introduce. In fact, it seems really strange that the government would be introducing one of the biggest social programs our province has seen in a while, and yet the general public barely gets a voice or a choice in how this program will work. If the ORPP is to become a reality, it must be a plan in which all Ontarians benefit from. Hopefully, the government will carefully consider and learn from the shared submissions and stories from across the province. Some of the voices in that room in Kingston were likely sharing similar messages across the province. The business community was well represented and shared their perspectives, as did community members from local unions and neighbours with no affiliation, but a vested interest in our shared future. People across the province have a lot at stake. There will be an impact on businesses, no doubt. But imagine the impact on those same businesses and community members when people are retiring in droves with no predictable income to spend in their communities. Imagine the downtown of any city, already challenged to do business in some cases. Imagine the downtown when no one feels free enough to spend, to shop, to meet a friend for lunch. What will that impact look like? We don't want our communities to suffer. As Ontarians, I don't believe we want our neighbours to struggle. We don't want our businesses to go under. We don't want our young people to feel hopeless. We don't want our seniors hungry and destitute. We want people employed. We want people to be secure and comfortable in their golden years. In 1965, the Canada Pension Plan was first established on a simple principle, that being a senior should not be the greatest indicator that an individual will live in poverty. It is from that initial belief that one of our country's largest, most inclusive social programs was born. And it is because of that same principle that we are all here today discussing pensions. At the end of the day, all Ontarians, all Canadians, and all people deserve the right to retire with dignity. Sorry. An hour really adds up. Okay. Too often, we are told that pension plans are a luxury or they are a thing of the past, but retirement security is not a luxury. It is a necessity, and the Canada Pension Plan continues to prove that collective retirement security can be delivered in an efficient, effective, and reliable manner. To this end, I would like to share a comment that was shared with me on Facebook. I am disabled, on a disability pension from a local employer who paid me very little money and who nickels and dimes me for every bit of disability pension I received. Retire? I want to survive. Retirement in any kind of comfort with basic needs is a dream I can't afford. Speaker, life doesn't stop at retirement, and the CPP was created on the principle that it is beneficial to all of us when our friends and our neighbours aren't struggling and can continue to contribute to the economy after they retire. Unfortunately, though, as the world has changed around us, the benefit provided by the CPP has become insufficient. The maximum yearly benefit is $12,500, and the average senior ends up receiving less than $7,000 per year from the Canada Pension Plan. It remains our steadfast belief, as the government maintains as well, that the ideal way to solve the retirement security crisis is through an enhancement of the CPP. It is the simplest solution for the greatest number of people, and it would permit a number of efficiencies and securities that can only be provided on a national scale. It is too bad that our Prime Minister does not see it the same way. Like our Conservative colleagues to my right, Prime Minister Harper also believes that our retirement security crisis can be solved with voluntary savings options that fill the pockets of bankers and insurance brokers collecting hefty fees at every turn. So, with CPP expansion currently off the federal table, we are left to explore other options. But I remind the government not to forget our shared belief that increasing the CPP is the ideal option. And as they continue to roll out the design of the ORPP, I hope they will ensure that the plan can be easily integrated in the event of future CPP expansion after Prime Minister Mulcair is sworn in. The NDP supports the idea of public pensions. That's why we proposed one for Ontario in 2010. The NDP supports progressive public programs. We don't, however, and never will support Harper-style pooled retirement pension plans, or PRPPs, that put banks ahead of people. It is concerning that the government so clearly prioritized bank products and Bay Street over pensions and the financial security of workers in this province. I was under the impression that as members of provincial parliament that we work for the people of Ontario and not for private financial institutions. PRPPs are not part of an Ontario retirement pension plan. They are financial products. The government is selling the idea of an Ontario retirement pension plan to Ontarians. The comforting and progressive language we are all hearing from the government speaks to the need for stability and the ability to live with dignity into retirement. However, the marketing of the PRPP legislation is that the government is giving Ontarians voluntary options. These voluntary bank products are not part of an Ontario retirement pension plan. They are favours for banks and investment companies who, incidentally, are going to be thrilled when Ontarians start putting their money into bank coffers. I'm not saying these aren't investments, but losing an average of 20 to 30% due to fees over the life of the investment is not the kind of retirement security that Ontarians should be banking on. If this government is truly committed to the idea of helping Ontarians plan for and afford their futures, if they truly believe in retirement security and stability, then they should have led with public pensions and not with their Harper-style pooled retirement pension plans, which commit money and benefit to corporations and banks. As I said before, banks and big business are doing just fine, and they are not planning to retire anytime soon. There are many ways to invest money in this province, Mr. Speaker. If you have money to invest, you have options. More soon with the PRPP legislation looming. There are many defined contribution or DC plans that are offered by different employers. DC plans come in many shapes and sizes. Many people are familiar with group RRSPs as one example. Defined contribution plans are based on the contribution, how much someone puts in. The benefit that is paid out at retirement is not guaranteed. It is subject to the will of the market. If the market plunges, so too does the benefit. Defined benefit plans deliver a benefit to retirees based on a defined and guaranteed benefit. The benefit is secure and predictable. People can participate in their economic community freely when they trust what they have coming in. Defined contribution plans are insufficient in terms of providing for pensioners, and they are more costly to the system in the long term. The shift from defined benefit to defined contribution is turning out to have been a short-sighted, corporate-driven, costly shift. DC plans are easier for employers on the paperwork side of things and shift the risk to employers. DC plans are tidier numbers to report to shareholders. As reports like Hoop's shifting public sector DB plans to DC, which states, If the motivation for a conversion to DC is to reduce costs, then it should be noted that shifting to DC actually increases the cost of delivering a comparable benefit. Come to light, we are seeing the benefit, pardon the pun, in prioritizing DB plans over DC plans. Our hope is the government will take counsel from those who are writing the reports and who actually and actuarially know about designing pensions. In terms of design, the issue which we have discussed in the greatest detail so far is the definition of a comparable plan. Mr. Speaker, I'll refer back to the bill and to the basic requirements of the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan schedule to elaborate on this issue. In order for an employee to be considered eligible, they must meet the following criteria and any other criteria specified by the not yet tabled next piece of legislation. 1. The individual is 18 years of age or older and under 70 years of age. 2. The individual is employed in Ontario and their employment is eligible employment. 3. The individual's annual salary and wages are above the minimum threshold. 4. The individual is not in receipt of a retirement benefit from the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. And lastly, 5. The individual does not participate in a comparable workplace pension plan as determined under the legislation referred to in subsection 1-2 of the Act. So let's look at number 5 again. To be eligible to contribute and benefit from this progressive and inclusive plan, the individual must not participate in a comparable workplace pension plan. But what is comparable? What will disqualify someone from benefiting from this plan? Again, let's look back at number 5. Comparable will be determined under the next piece of legislation. The bad news, we don't know what comparable means. The good news, neither does the government. Yet, I know the government is deep in consultation with some of the leading minds in the field of pensions and retirement security. I know because we have been as well. And there are so many important things to consider. It is at least reassuring that the government hasn't made any rash decisions. So while it is still up for discussion, let us explore a few more ideas to consider when we are discussing comparability. What is comparable? As New Democrats, we were worried that comparability might be determined on the contribution side rather than the benefits side. While we never got an answer to our repeated inquiries and question period on this matter, we were glad to read in the Liberal discussion paper and hear from the Minister that defined contribution plans, or DC plans, will not be considered comparable and therefore disqualify their members from benefiting from this Ontario pension plan. I would like to follow that up, though, with a reminder that my question from November remains unanswered on the order paper. And while the government might suggest it has been answered, after sitting across the room from this government and developing an appreciation for their understanding of commitment, you can appreciate why I might want it in writing. With the amount of pressure that this government will no doubt be under from the banking and insurance lobbies, I know how tempting it might be to reverse that position and do a U-turn. Defined contribution plans are not comparable. They must not be considered as such, no matter how tightly they put the screws to you. Another issue with comparability, it says in the schedule that a worker may not participate in a comparable workplace pension plan. So my question, Mr. Speaker, is this. Are we only talking about plans, or are we talking about people? Here's my point. Some might argue that as a teacher, my plan would be considered comparable or better, and therefore disqualify me from participating. Some might argue that OMERS, a strong pension plan, also would be considered comparable. That seems to make sense from a plan-to-plan comparison standpoint. However, from a person-to-person point of view, imagine a part-time worker in an OMERS plan. That person would receive a significantly reduced amount compared with a full-time worker contributing to the same plan. That reduced amount is not sufficient to live on. So, do they deserve to be disqualified from participating in a plan that would allow them to live more securely? Also, what about workers who have only paid into these comparable plans for a short period of time? Their pension benefit could be a pittance compared to someone else's in the same plan. I would urge the government to approach this question carefully. This is what it looks like from here. It looks like the government is focusing on disqualifying people to reassure the business community that fewer and fewer people will be eligible to participate. I have suggested in this legislature that the focus be on ways to include more and more people. If the goal is to provide more security, then do it. If the goal is to grow the pot of money for the future benefit of working Ontarians, then let more people participate. What if a potentially exempt worker wants to pay in, wants to invest in Ontario, will there be a way to voluntarily opt in? What if a worker who is close to retirement wants to pay more now to benefit more later? Will there be a way to top up and pay more in? What if a worker is part-time or recently enrolled in their current comparable pension plan and won't receive sufficient benefit? What added security can this plan offer them? The old adage, the more the merrier, may not be entirely appropriate, but it worked for our healthcare system that was once universal and proud and strong. Since it has been reduced, undermined, and chipped away at by the federal and provincial governments, it is the average individual in Ontario that is now paying the price. There is an opportunity here. The government should not be so quick to dismiss the arguments for universality. The logistics and administrative nightmare of tracking even one individual through their career of varied employment, eligible, ineligible, comparable, not comparable, that should be factored in. It would seem that everyone in the country, with perhaps the exception of Prime Minister Stephen Harper, supports the expansion of the CPP. So, after the next federal election, when Tom Mulcair is at the helm, we'll be looking at different options for retirement, which will be great. However, I appreciate the glee from the other side at the prospect. However, as I have said, the call from those interested in pensions is that this plan must mirror the CPP to the greatest extent possible. If it doesn't, rather than providing retirement security for more people, it might undermine the goal of expanding the CPP for all Canadians. And this can't happen. We concede that there are tricky details to figure out, but starting at a place that is the most inclusive seems to be a good place to start. Everyone deserves the opportunity to live with dignity and security in their retirement. Perhaps the government might consider that everyone deserves the opportunity to participate and benefit in a plan that will ensure the security. And to the same end, the government needs to also consider portability. Job hopping seems to be the new norm for modern workers, and not necessarily voluntary job hopping. And trends show that the average worker tends to stay in one workplace for no more than 5 years. This means that as they move between workplaces, their pension needs to move with them. It needs to be portable. And as new challenges arise, so do new questions, such as how to handle workers that move in and out of the province. What will the effect be on workers that have a comparable pension, then move to a workplace that does not? I suspect the government has heard these concerns before, and I hope that they have been listening. And as I've said before, we are lucky to have a breadth of experience in this province that understands the implications of even the smallest of design features. Of course, the closer the plan is to the CPP, the less these concerns arise, and I hope the government understands that as well. Of the many design details that will be debated in the coming months and years, perhaps the one that requires the most delicacy is establishing the minimum earnings threshold. It is important that low-income Ontarians are given the opportunity to participate in the ORPP, but it is just as important that they can be included without being penalized through a reduction in their guaranteed income supplement or Ontario Guaranteed Annual Income System benefit. And though the minimum earnings threshold is not established in this bill beyond Section 5, subsection 4, which states, contributions shall be determined by applying the applicable contribution rate to the portion of the eligible employee's annual salary and wages between the minimum threshold and the maximum threshold. The consultation paper released by the government in December did state that to reduce the burden on low-income workers, earnings below a certain threshold would be exempt from contributions, similar to the CPP. So I am pleased to see that the government is taking this into account. Simply being aware of the problem, however, does not necessarily ensure a solution. Though I understand that the consultation process the government underwent was little more than a public relations exercise, I would refer them to the written submission provided by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, entitled Getting the Design Right on the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. And I would advise them that there are some pretty amazing resources available to them that they should not gloss over so quickly. I will read a portion of the minimum threshold section of that report. Prohibiting low-income workers from participating in the ORPP, which will increase the chances of living in poverty at retirement, is not the appropriate policy solution. The consultation paper identifies the impacts that the ORPP can have on low-income seniors in retirement. These impacts result from high tax back rates from the Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS. It also provides data showing that not all low-income earners end up low income in retirement, and not all high-income earners are high income in retirement. The potential impact of the ORPP results from the design of the GIS. It is not a problem created by the ORPP, and therefore the design of the ORPP cannot solve the problem. The best solution is to make changes in the GIS to reduce the tax back rate. An Ontario solution could ensure that low-income earners would not be contributing during their working lives to a pension plan that would be taxed back from them in retirement. It could take the form of a refundable tax credit payable to low-income individuals. Employers would continue to contribute on all pensionable earnings. Low-income employees would get contributions back at tax time. An existing mechanism that could be enhanced would be the working income tax benefit. The biggest challenge for this recommended mechanism would be the federal-provincial financial implications. For low-income earners, the tax credit would result in the premium being paid to and credited back by Ontario, and then taxed back in retirement by the federal government through the GIS. As a result, Ontario revenues would be reduced to offset the sharp tax back of a federal program. This is why a reduction in the GIS tax back rate is the preferred option. So, Mr. Speaker, we can see it's a complicated problem. But fortunately, there are a multitude of experts that are ready and willing to offer insight wherever needed. The important part is that the government adheres to the principle of including low-income Ontarians without adding undue burden. Budgets are stretched thin enough as it is, and the ORPP needs to work with existing programs to ensure that there is no additional penalty. Another concern we have with the design of the ORPP is a concerning little section in the 2014 budget, and our Conservative colleagues found it too. According to the 2014 budget, in the section entitled Unlocking Value from Government Assets, the government presents the following. By unlocking value from its assets and encouraging more Ontarians to save through a proposed new Ontario retirement pension plan, new pools of capital would be available for Ontario-based projects such as building roads, bridges, and new transit. Our strong alternative financing and procurement model, run by Infrastructure Ontario, will allow for the efficient deployment of this capital in job-creating projects. Picking up the phone to say, hey, pension management, hey. I'm just waiting. Picking up the phone to say, hey, pension management team, we misjudged the cost of our transit project is not an acceptable practice. Pension plans operate with the sole objective of delivering a secure retirement for their members. And this sort of language from the government leads us to believe that they are less concerned with this principle than the dozen other holes they've dug for themselves. We want guarantees that this pension pool will be further away than arm's length. This money is for retirement security and retirement future, not for bankrolling more dysfunctional public-private partnership boondoggles or for sinking into more scandals. This government is notorious for throwing good money after bad. This pension plan must be stronger than gold-plated. It needs to be steel-walled against political sticky fingers. Guarantee that for the people of Ontario, please. There can't be an emergency pension fund bat phone. Those who will be qualified and chosen to manage and administer this plan must be from the pension world, not from the back rooms at Queen's Park. And their goal must be to ensure retirement security, not finance campaign promises. Speaking of those from the pension world, I would like to acknowledge the many and mighty pension experts and enthusiasts that we have been able to meet with since the election. There are some wonderful minds in this field, and we are glad that they are in consultation with the government. We would encourage the government to continue to meet with design experts, actuaries, plan administrators, and pensioner groups long after the ORPP has been implemented. We've had the opportunity to meet with pension academics, plan administrators, labour leaders, think tanks, and pensioner groups. As I said earlier, I know the government has met with a number of the same people, and I hope their messages and lessons resonated. Just in case they didn't, I would point you to the written submissions. Let's see. To the written submissions provided by the Ontario Federation of Labour, by CUPE, and the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives as shining examples of the available expertise. All three groups have consulted extensively, combining their own knowledge with the knowledge of others and the experiences of workers across the province. In fact, I'm pleased to see Steve Staples here. Here is the OFL's Director of Research and Education and Assistant to the President. Welcome. Our pension system needs strengthening in a broader capacity. And as we said earlier, the ORPP is a new piece, but it does not solve the other pension plan issues. Thank you to those we have met with and continue to learn from and work with. Also, on a personal note, I'd like to acknowledge the work of my colleagues from Hamilton East Stony Creek and our leader from Hamilton Centre, whom have both worked diligently to advance the goals of a secure retirement for Ontarians. And also, thank you to our research team. Thanks to Ethan for everything he's invested through the years to ensure more Ontarians retire with dignity. But as we in this legislature know, not everyone is on the same page. In the coming months, the government can expect to come up against massive opposition from the banking and insurance industries. But as I've said before, banks and big business are doing just fine, and they have no plan to retire anytime soon. I imagine the government has immense pressure from the banks and insurance companies to make changes interested in workers and families and in the average individual who is trying to get by and hopefully get ahead. The Bay Street lobby groups are pretty pleased that the government is rolling out the promised PRPP legislation so far ahead of any real ORPP legislation. The latter, as we see here, is little more than a shell game introduced by the government to distract Ontarians from the far more detailed private PRPP legislation that the government has tabled to appease the banks and insurance companies. This isn't an initiative, however, that will only impact big business. There isn't anyone in this legislature who will deny that a province-wide pension will have an impact on businesses. Our Conservative colleagues have said that this pension is going to be carried on the backs of the private sector. We have heard that it is business that creates wealth. We have heard from businesses that they will have to find the money somewhere to pay their ORPP contributions and will fire people, move businesses out of the country, and will stop donating to charities. If we are going to speak in extremes, then I have a few to volunteer. Right now in this province, the financial mistakes of this government are being carried by families across the province. Families are paying for hydro mismanagement and global debt repayment, not their debt repayment, but it's on them. The OPSU campaign we saw yesterday here at the doors of Queen's Park is asking, what would you do with 8.2? Asks what the average person would do with $8.2 billion in wasted money. So, with people paying their own way and paying the government's way out of the government's hole, why are they now being threatened by a violent reaction from business for wanting to have secure retirements? If businesses alone create wealth, then what on earth are customers, patrons, and clients for? It isn't just people in stores that create business, it's people spending money in stores that keep the economic world turning. We acknowledge a short-term impact, but what would be the impact of consumers holding on to their money because they don't have enough and can't rely on predictable income coming in? What's the impact on a business in the long term? And how many businesses fold because of an additional 1.9% versus how many businesses will fold if Ontarians are no longer able to participate in their economic community after retirement? Why is everything here so short-sighted? Initiatives are either based on election cycles or immediate financial gain. Where's the big picture, long-term thinking that will save money in the long run? Everything seems to be buy now and pay later. Where is the invest now, reap the benefit later? The Conservatives and business voices are saying that people aren't saving, and that's their problem, that they should know better. Well, here we have a case of focus on the short term instead of the long-term investment, and one would think that they should know better. This plan isn't about undermining business. We are all part of an economic ecosystem. We work together. When we let it get out of whack, one part might benefit, but another falters, and that isn't what's best for our communities. We have rich and dynamic business diversity in Oshawa, and I am sure that that is true in communities across the province. I hope that more people will be able to frequent their local business establishments, appreciate their services, enjoy their products, and invest in their business for many years to come. And they are more likely to do it if we switch our thinking to long-term and ensure that people have a predictable, steady income. So, full disclosure, I'm a fourth-generation public sector worker. I am a New Democrat, and I am a staunch trade unionist. So, as I'm sure people might guess, I have a set of progressive values, and pensions are right in line with my ideas about opportunities, human value, and dignity. I have a hard time understanding the argument against pensions and retirement security. But here is some of what I have picked up along the way. I have heard that if people knew how to save, then they would. Related to that, I have heard that we need to teach financial literacy to address the savings crisis. I have heard that if people learn to eat well and live well, then they would have more money. I heard yesterday that we need to focus on building home equity. I am all about education, and I remember learning in high school about compound interest and how it could work for you or how it could work against you. And I thought of that lesson when I was forced to live off of credit cards for a time. I fully understood the situation. But this isn't about me. I would like to share the story of an Oshawa couple in their late 20s and their new young daughter. As Jesse shared with our office, quote, "For our family, savings isn't an option." Jesse and Savannah are students in Oshawa that attend Durham College and UOIT respectively, and they're also young parents of a 2.5-year-old. Jesse and Savannah both work part-time, volunteer in the community development sector, attend full-time classes, and try to spend every spare moment that they have with their toddler. Their income is largely subsidized by student loans, with a combined debt load of $70,000. Savannah put her name on the waiting list for subsidized childcare the day after she found out she was having a baby about 3.5 years ago. They didn't get a spot until this past September. Before they received a child care subsidy, they were spending $200 a week on private child care for a babysitter. After rent, utilities, food, and clothing are paid for, some months they end up pulling in less than they owe. Their family income is less than $20,000 a year, and when the temperatures drop, the increase in heating bills gobble up any leftover disposable income. When they can, they support their parents too, who are also dealing with issues such as long-term disabilities and financial problems. Saving for retirement is simply not an option. They understand all too well how to bargain shop, cut costs, and do more with less. It isn't a matter of a lack of financial literacy or hard work. Between school, volunteering, and working, Jesse and Savannah are both working more than 50 hours per week. In an economy increasingly producing short-term, part-time, precarious employment with no benefits, and the cost of education, childcare, and the basic necessities of life, such as food getting higher and higher, their prospects for saving for retirement are grim. That is why an Ontario retirement pension plan and an increased CPP is essential for the long-term financial security for working-class families. Jesse and Savannah aren't looking for a handout. They're just looking to be treated fairly in an increasingly unfair economy. They are looking for a way to get ahead. And I don't know if their story is that different from others across the province. Mr. Speaker, with how complicated the world is these days, I would say that most young people today could teach the older dogs some new tricks about stretching a dollar, creative budgeting, or sacrifice. They can't imagine a time when home ownership was a possibility. They won't likely have a job for more than a few years. They can't afford tuition repayments, transit, rent, and life, so they might have to stay living with their parents. These are choices other generations didn't necessarily have to make. It isn't fair to compare then and now and measure today by yesterday's yardstick. It is fair to look at now and fix it for the future. I would challenge the Conservatives to revamp their arguments to reflect the reality facing the whole community and not just their immediate neighbours. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to be able to stand in this proud legislature and speak about pensions, and I thank the member opposite for the opportunity to speak today. Coming out of the public sector, specifically education, I do know the value of a pension. Pensioners know the value of a pension, and those who work and wonder how they will survive or thrive after their working years know the value of a pension. As New Democrats, we have always and will always continue to believe that all Ontarians should have access to a strong, defined benefit pension plan. And for those that don't have one, it is our duty as representatives of this province to provide it. We want Ontarians to have good pensions. A good pension is a safe, protected, low-cost vehicle for individuals to not only save money, but for employers to add to that savings and for that protected savings to grow and eventually provide benefits and financial predictability and security into retirement. Ben Franklin is quoted as saying, "In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." Well, with all due respect to Mr. Franklin, I would add to that. What I know to be certain is that life is full of surprises. Expect the unexpected. Well, that sounds fun, until you have to pay for those surprises. People know that life will happen, and if they don't have money in the bank or money coming in, they will live in dread of the next surprise that means they won't be able to pay their bills or feed themselves. Mr. Speaker, life doesn't stop at retirement. People with a predictable income can make plans. People with a predictable income can spend some of it. People with a predictable income can live more freely and participate in their economy, whether that means seeing a movie with a friend or planning a trip. People with a predictable income won't lie awake at night dreading what the future might bring. People still want to participate in their communities after they retire. They want to be secure. People will want to know there is money and that they have health and wellness support as they age and improve. Hardworking Ontarians are going to retire eventually, and all of them deserve to work and retire with dignity. So, Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of work to be done. We all agree on the importance of retirement security, but as we all know, the devil is in the details, and so we'll look forward to seeing more of the details of this plan, and we will fight to ensure that the plan is strong, progressive, and available to as many Ontarians as possible. As a New Democrat, I know the value of a strong, defined benefit pension, and we hope that the government does too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.